button here. There we go. And thank you all for making it work. We'll get started. I'm going to share my screen like has been typical, and we'll look at the agenda to get started. And so you should be able to see my screen now. And obviously, we'll review and approve the minutes from last Friday. Thank you, Christine, for doing those. We will look at some items that are a result of the call that some of us got to take place in with the Office of Discovery on Tuesday, I think it was. And there was a team of technical advisors from the state office that took us through a number of things, answered some questions, showed us a new reporting template, and more to come on that. And then we'll maybe, depending on how much progress has been made, Tina, allow you to give us any update, if there is any update on the reimbursement part of our plan. And then we'll talk through a number of things about the direct aid plan. And you can see the bullet points there. And there's some complexities in there that hopefully between the conversations that a number of us have been trying to have, that we've been able to bring some simplicity to it, and we'll see where we're at. And then we'll talk about what our next meeting needs to look like and what the date of that is. And so that's the agenda that I have in mind for today. Are there any questions about that? Hearing none, and I won't put them up there unless somebody asks me to, but does anyone have any questions about the minutes that were sent out? I reviewed them and they looked accurate to me, but I may have missed something. So I'll give some space here for any questions about the minutes from last week.
I believe I got those.
I sent them last night to the task force along with the agenda.
And I don't think I got that either.
So did I not send it? Somebody help me out here. Maybe I just thought I sent it. Can anyone else verify?
I received it.
Okay. My phone must have just flicked it off.
Well, double check, Janine, and if when we're done here, if you don't find it on your email, maybe send me an email and I'll send it right back to you. Is that okay?
That sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Okay,
yeah, I got
great.
it last night also.
I have a group that I send them to that's called Spark Task Force. So, but if it didn't come, I don't know what happened. I just wanted to make sure that I had in fact sent it. Okay, well, let's consider the minutes approved by consensus then, and let's jump into the agenda. Turns out I think this agenda is going to take more time than I had last week, at least anticipated that it would. The Office of Discovery Zoom call did give us, one thing I got from there was we do have clean approval. The memo that Janine received and that ended up being forwarded to all of us was essentially saying that they just wanted to be sure we were considering some things. So the letter of explanation that I had showed you all last week, that if they had asked us to submit, we could have submitted. There hasn't even been a question about that. So if at some point those questions are raised again by our technical advisor or by others, we have that letter on file that we could provide to them that I believe answers all the questions of consideration that they provided in their memo. But that was no cause for us to have to delay any further. We can move forward insofar as we feel that we are ready. And in keeping with that, we did two significant things over the past week. One, we advertised our nonprofit and our business grant application process. And of course, we're getting grants coming in now, and there was some sidebar conversation going on there with Anthony before we officially convened the meeting. So that's happening. More to say about that at the end of this meeting, I think. The second thing that we did was we sent emails to the city, municipalities, and the school districts announcing that they had been approved for an allocation of up to a dollar amount, and that dollar amount varied, of course. And in that communication, and this is on me, there was a mistake in date range that those funds could be used to cover. I had mistakenly understood that to be August 15 or later, up until the end of the year. And in fact, it was March 1st till the end of the year. Aaron, have you been able to let the schools know of that change in date range?
Hey, just real quick, Rusty.
Yes.
Are we sure that it's March 1st and not March 15th?
The reading that I did and the feedback that I got from SJH&L was March 1st.
Okay. Because
So
I
I
felt
would
like
not
the
claim that I would not claim that I'm sure of it, but I'm as sure as I can be.
Okay, well, if that's what they're saying, then that's what we go with. I just recall reimbursement being March 15th, and so March 1st is fine with me.
And if March 1st ends up being too early, I think SJH&L, if they get word that they had misinterpreted that, they'll have a chance to catch that yet in the reconciliation process.
Okay.
And yes, I let him know.
Thanks,
Rusty?
Aaron. And Anthony, were you able to get that changed before you sent the email out to the cities?
Yes.
Okay. So then those are the two things that we've done that were supported by what we heard in the Zoom call on Tuesday. We will have access to a technical advisor. And Janine, what's your understanding, or Tina, either one, of what that really means for us? His name's Brad Cantor. Is that the right, have I got that right?
That's who we received something from. And it sounded like he'd looked at everything, but he didn't tell us anything on the email I got.
So are we able to ask him questions, or what's your understanding of that arrangement, that relationship?
Well, I'm thinking we can email him, and he says he'll get back to us within 48 hours.
So yes, we can ask him questions.
Yes, we can ask him questions.
Did you have something else you were trying to say?
Okay, did you get the email from Swindle, Jansen, Hawk, and Lloyd that came in late last night?
I did, and I called them this morning about that.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure you were in on that one.
Yep, and I'll actually share as we go along what they said. And Tina, they helped clarify some things you and I talked about yesterday as well.
Rusty, before we move away from this, Janine, could you share that email? I have some questions to clarify one of my projects. The sheriff and I talked about it, and we had a few questions about the email that was sent to us. So we'd like to just sit and visit with him and get a better understanding.
And are you talking, Randy, about the technical advisor email?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. That'd be great. Okay, so that's kind of the big thing that came out of the technical advisor's presentation on Tuesday was a new reporting template. And I will get to that here on our third or fourth agenda item. It's a bit of a beast. It felt really complex to me. I do believe now I've got my mind around it, and through conversations with Tina and John Albrecht, I feel like I can at least make a suggestion of how we can proceed and it not overwhelm us. So then next on the agenda, Tina, is there any update as it relates to the commissioner's potential approval of the reimbursement?
Right after this meeting, I'm going through the county's direct bill things right now, and we have talked internally. I haven't talked with Janine yet, but as far as what our county process is going to be, and then I think that we're going to try to pay those reimbursements with a pay date of the 22nd, which would be a Tuesday, so it's not on our regular with anything else that we may have early checks for. And then I think I just need to go back and review the actual requests. And if there's anything I have a question on, then like we had talked about the payroll, and Anthony, I think, was maybe the only one that had submitted anything. So I will double back on that if I have questions. So,
Okay.
but I'm thinking that we can do that. So they will take care of approval on their Monday meeting, but the date of the checks will be for Tuesday.
Gotcha. Thanks, Tina. You mentioned payroll, so I'll say a word about that. I don't pretend to really totally understand that issue. I know payroll is an option within the scope of all of this. Payroll is something that can be funded as long as it meets certain criteria. They did talk about that a lot on the call on Tuesday. For public health and safety employees, up to 100% of their payment during this date range could be covered by this grant potentially, and then for organizations that aren't in the quote business of public health and safety, if they have dedicated time that they can prove was given to COVID-19 mitigation, then part of their payroll could be covered as well. So they called it substantially dedicated was the phrase they used, substantially dedicated employees. But they, in the same breath, said it will be scrutinized very carefully and you better be careful. Those were almost the exact words that they used. And they really didn't say that about any of the other areas of, expenses or projected expenses that could be covered.
Well, can I say something about that?
Please.
One thing that surprised me on that meeting was that they said they did talk quite a bit about PPE purchases and bulk purchasing of that. And if you're going to, and they said on the call that if we're going to purchase in bulk, there needs to be a documented plan showing how it's going to be used and how it's going to be dispersed, which was surprising to me because that's the first time I've ever heard that in this. And so, and then they also talked about capital projects like buildings, that if people are building buildings for this, that they need to be able to show that a more temporary option was not feasible. And so that's the first time I've ever heard those things. And it kind of alarmed me because we have some of those projects going on right now. So I just want to, that was surprising. So I'm really hoping they don't keep coming out with more and more of these kind of
Shocks.
Guidance after we've already started things.
Yep.
I think that for the counties projects, I think that we probably have the documentation that we need. We just need to gather it and have it ready in the file in case it's questioned. But those were two items. And those of you that are working with larger organizations like schools, I think that they also need to know this about the PPE, that if they're buying their own and they're buying large quantities, that they need to potentially be able to document, how they plan to use it.
And when.
Thanks, Tina.
And when, right.
I was now that you're reminding me of that, the capital issue. And so Randy, I think it would be really important for you to talk directly with our technical advisor, Brad Cantor. That was the email you asked Janine for, and talk to him particularly about two things: the building of that shed and the potential of purchasing a command mobile center, because both of those things are going to be scrutinized pretty carefully now that I reread some things this morning. And so Randy, I think it's really important for you to get agreement from our technical advisor that those are good to go.
That was one of the topics I was going to talk about.
Okay.
The one was the building that Tina mentioned. In her email didn't mention the command trailer, did mention the building and the PPE.
Yeah, my reading of it is that you should talk to him about the command center as well.
Fair enough.
Randy, on the meeting, one of the things they said was that counties need to be careful about acquiring permanent assets that are going to be used for other things. And they particularly mentioned buildings. So I kind of had taken it with the building part being the most critical as far as that. But of course, I guess the command center would be a permanent asset.
It would be. Too.
But I think that it can be more directly tied to COVID. But I would agree that it might be a good idea since they did say permanent assets, and to maybe just verify that. I know we already ordered the trailer and I've got the bill for it and I'm putting it in for payment. So I would hate for us not to get reimbursed.
Ouch.
I understand. If you can forward me this gentleman's email and phone number, I will contact him today.
And just a heads up, Randy, this won't surprise you, I'm sure, but my guess is it'll be a day or two before you're able to actually get him to respond. But maybe I'm wrong on that. It just, when I read Janine's email that she received from me, it made it sound like to me that he has got a queue of responses that take him 48 hours to get through. So
fair enough.
Okay, thank you, Tina.
One more note on that. I know that Janine and I are the designated contacts for the county. So if there's any problem with like Randy, if you have any trouble getting through and speaking directly with him, I'm sure Janine or I would be happy to facilitate that to help.
We'll see where it goes. Thanks.
Thanks, that's really helpful. Okay, our next item on our agenda is the direct aid update. This is where a lot of the complexities for us start to come into play. We have communicated to our school districts and our cities. We have corrected the date range per what you heard earlier. We are going to need to consider our administration plan in light of a new template, and I'm gonna put that up there because I think we really need to take a look at this. Give me just a second here to make sure I get the right one. There it is. Okay, so this is the Excel sheet that we'll have to fill out. And the reason I'm bringing this up for everyone's attention is on this tab here, my understanding, Janine, is that for anything that's county expense related, you'll have to itemize them in this spreadsheet. And so I won't say a lot more about that. You have that spreadsheet, Janine, because you're the one who forwarded it to me. And so the county expenses would include anything in the health department, this trailer we were just talking about, the potential of a storage building, PPE that we would be purchasing, various other things. And also what we ended up doing, and really this just dawned on me this morning when I looked really close at a bunch of things, was the COVID lab, retrofitting of the old hospital. Really that SJH&L had us bury that underneath the county. So the county will be reimbursing Tabor for that, is the way that that's structured. I see a funny look on faces there, so we can talk more about that, but I'm almost certain of that after talking to SJH&L. I don't think that's a big deal, honestly, but just so you know, this is where all that's going to get recorded. I'm going to stop to see if there's questions or comments about that. And especially Tina or Janine, do you guys have questions or comments about that particular part of the report?
Not particularly on the report itself. And we can talk offline about what you will turn in for. I know that on the initial plan, I noticed that retrofit, and that I think there was 141,000.
That's right.
And it was listed as public health, but I was told during that meeting that that was the Tabor retrofit and lab. So that was on the county plan initially. And so those things we'll just need to talk through how you
Sure.
submit that for payment. So.
Yep, sure, no problem. I think our CFO has all that pulled together as we speak. He's finishing up pulling it all together. So yeah, we can talk off on that.
Perfect.
Okay, so this next tab, all right, before we leave this tab, unless Janine, you and Tina think otherwise, I don't see a reason for us, me, whoever, to pull this particular tab off as a separate worksheet. We could just, you could just be working on that as part of the master worksheet. Am I missing something there, or does that sound like a go on that part?
I think that's appropriate, just to leave it all together for us.
Okay. So then on this next tab, Anthony, this is what the cities will use to report their itemized expenses on. And what I've done is I've pulled this tab out per Tina's recommendation, and then John Albrecht affirmed that as a good recommendation. I've pulled this out, Anthony, as a separate spreadsheet that I can send to you, and then you can send it to each city, and then month by month, as they are requesting money out of their allocation, they can submit their receipts and their detail in this spreadsheet. And then what that allows, either, and this decision I'm about to identify needs to be made, that allows either Christine or Janine to really cut and paste into a master spreadsheet that we will be using. And so, but for sure what it will need to have happen, Christine, is the receipts will have to be organized so that when they're sent to SJH&L along with the spreadsheet for each particular city, they can kind of reconcile them. And so I'm going to stop and see what questions, recommendations there are. So what you see in front of you, just to reiterate, I've created a separate spreadsheet with just this, what you see right here, that can be sent to each city municipality for them to do their itemized recording in, and then submit it along with their receipts each month.
Just a quick question. So each city will have their own version of this.
That's correct. Now okay. Ultimately, it'll have to all be brought together on this master sheet, okay. Anthony, but the answer to your question, I believe, is yes.
Okay. So do we want, is this going to be like cumulative, so they turn it in October 5th and then November 5th they just add to their sheet? Or are they sending in a new sheet without the October 5th?
Yeah, that's a good question. It seems to me it might make sense to reduce clutter if they just turn in a new sheet for each month.
I think that's the preference, for them to do a new sheet each month and have those documents that go with it together with that. And we can do the cut and paste in a cumulative sheet.
Right. Okay. All right. Just want to make sure I'm sending the right info out.
So then I want that, what Tina said was a bit subtle, but in my mind really critical, because I heard that as a decision, and I concur with that. The receipts and the spreadsheets, while they'll be emailed to Christine, her job is to simply triage, forward them on to Janine, and forward them on to the accounting firm. What I just heard Tina say is Janine will then cut and paste them into the master spreadsheet. Did I mishear that?
Did I just volunteer someone?
We'll get it done.
Yeah, between us. Now, the question that I have though, Rusty, so this is, so The clarification from Swindle, Jensen, Hawk, and Lloyd was not that they would combine into the cumulative sheets.
Yes,
Because initially I thought that overall they were going to
Do that.
the reporting. So if you have clarification on that, I think it's important that we know that before we make the decision.
I do have clarification because I called John first thing this morning. Thank you, Tina, for pointing that out. And what he clarified was they were expecting us to populate all the tabs except the summary tab. Now the summary tab, there it is crazy complex, and they'll take care of that one. But they expected the county to populate this one, somebody within our organizational structure outside of them to populate this one and the rest of these tabs. Now the rest of them aren't as complicated. These are the two that are as complicated because we're required to report every detail. So
Okay, I have an additional question real quick that's somewhat related to this that have come up in the last couple of days. I've had people ask me, first off, with the direct aid, we're not just sending them their direct aid. They've got to turn stuff in to be reimbursed.
that is correct.
Second question is, if they send us an invoice, does it already need to be paid, or can they send it in and then pay it?
So I'm only going to give my perspective. Others, especially county employees, may disagree, but my perspective has been that if they submit a purchase order or an invoice, but it hasn't been paid yet, and the accounting firm says, check, that meets the requirements, then
Right.
that we can cut that organization a check, but then they would need to later verify that it had in fact been paid.
Okay.
And I would want to know which ones had already been paid and which ones hadn't.
Yes.
Because we have it set up in our accounting a different way. And the reason I did that specifically, that was what I kind of was talking about internally yesterday, was so that we would know which ones needed to be followed up on to make sure that we have proof of that they actually paid the bill.
Okay. Now, I assume with the schools, we're just transferring the money to them. Correct?
Well, when you say that, are you talking about the process of getting them the money, or are you talking about how we decide whether they get it?
I assume, from my understanding, we're treating the schools differently in that we're just sending them the money that we've allocated, and then after the fact, they are sending in their stuff.
Good question.
That's what I
press
gathered.
Pause on that one because we'll get to this
Okay.
tab in a minute.
Okay.
But that is a really good question, and it's an important decision. But so before we go there, Tina and Janine, that last thing you said, Tina, about we'd want to, in our accounting systems, know what's been paid and what hasn't, so we know how to track it and verify some things. I know I didn't word that exactly right, but I think I have the gist. That, in my mind, is a reason for the treasurer's office to be responsible for ultimately doing the data entry. Now, if the accounting firm can be talked into doing the data entry, so be it. I couldn't talk them into it, nor did I feel I had the authority to try, to be honest with you.
I think that just having since ultimately we're the ones responsible for making sure that the county funds are appropriately allocated, I think that it should be in the county's hands as far as populating those spreadsheets, and Janine and I will work together on them.
Okay. Good enough. Okay, so now let's address what will be a series of questions, not the least of which is the one Anthony was asking about schools. So to recap, because of how much is here, this tab is where the county expenses get recorded. I don't really see a need for Janine to process that through Christine in most cases. So I don't see that you would need to do that, Janine. If you guys are working with Randy or Deidre on particular expenses, or right there in the courthouse with particular expenses, why would you need to process that through Christine? There's really no need for that, right? So I think for the most part, you all can handle everything that this spreadsheet entails, first and foremost, right there in your offices, and then work directly with SJH&L for whatever additional verifications that you need to get from them. Would you agree with that, Janine and Tina?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so that's that tab. This tab is for the cities primarily, and I think maybe even exclusively, Anthony. And that's the tab we just talked about in quite a bit of detail. That will be the one that would come to Christine. She triages it, moves it to the SJH&L and to the county treasurer's and city clerk's office, or county clerk's office, and then it gets handled from there. This tab is the tab that's for all K through 12 schools. And the way I understand it is that each row would be a school district, and that's it. So the tab is pretty complicated. There's a section for September divided into a variety of types of expenses, and each category of expense for September, notice this section is for September, is reported in aggregate. Then same for October. Everything for this particular school district on this row for October that's requested is reported by category in aggregate, and so forth and so on for November and December. What I've done, similar to what I did with this expense report external tab, I've taken the transfers K-12 tab and I've created a spreadsheet with just this in it. And Aaron, what I am proposing is that each school district would receive this spreadsheet and they would populate it, just one row each month. And then they would send that to receive funds to Christine, who would then, this will be pretty simple, who would triage it, move it to the clerk in the treasurer's office, get it to SJH&L along with the receipts, because they will have to provide receipts. It's just that we won't have to list it receipt by receipt. We'll just calculate it each month in aggregate according to categories. And so then, similar to what Anthony asked about, do we do a new spreadsheet each month? In this case, the answer to that's no, because the spreadsheet itself is divided month by month. All the school district would do, Aaron, was just move from September to October to November to December as they turned it in each month. I'm going to stop to see if there's clarifications, questions, recommendations other than what I've proposed that in terms of how we handle this.
I think that looks great. I feel it's important for each entity that's requesting the funds to fill in their own report and provide their documentation, because they know better than we do what those expenses are for and what category they need to report in. And it also puts some of the responsibility there as far as them understanding that they have to spend it on what it is designated for.
Yeah. So Aaron, if you imagined yourself doing this, does it make sense to you at this point, like if you had to jump in and start filling this out now yourself, and you'd probably ask your CFO to do it, I get that, but is there anything in your mind that you say, oh, Rusty, we better clarify this or that? Aaron may not be with us right now. That's okay. Okay. So that's the others. Are there other people who are wondering about this piece here? If you are, please ask, because what I've found is if I explain something and other people don't understand it, it probably means I haven't understood it fully. Okay. Then to review, that's a separate spreadsheet now. You're looking at it as a tab in a master spreadsheet, but I've cut and pasted that and created a separate spreadsheet. And I have figured out, by the way, Janine and Tina and Christine, others who might be at times working with these spreadsheets. You see those drop downs right there? I've figured out how to move those over into a separate spreadsheet. So wherever there's a drop down across here in the master, that'll be available as a drop down to the entity that it goes to as well, which is pretty key in making things efficient when we cut and paste. Okay. Then the final one is the grant programs. And the grant programs for us are the nonprofit grants and the business grants. And so that's this tab right here. I don't really see them doing this spreadsheet themselves. I don't really see that happening very effectively. I think we're going to have to do this. And so when we approve a business grant, it comes in, and here's what will actually make it a little easier, Janine. It comes in under one row of the spreadsheet. So in other words, they are not wanting an itemized list of all the businesses that get approved for a grant. The business grant comes in as one row. And so what we do is take those grant and simply categorize them as aggregate expenses for businesses. So if we give 25 business grants, the total amount spent under the category of food programs under all 25 would be calculated in one cell. I'm going to stop to see if this is the direction we want to continue to go down, or if we want to administratively rethink the business and nonprofit grant program. So there would only, in what they've requested, the Office of Recovery, in our master spreadsheet, which ultimately you're looking at what that is, under this tab right here, there would only be two rows. One row for businesses, one row for nonprofits.
So we need
So-
to create our own.
Yeah, so I think that's fine as far as what we're submitting, but as we're receiving applications and as we're processing those, we are going to need to develop some sort of a list, some sort of our own spreadsheet to be able to list them out, and they'll need to have some specific information so that we can track the approvals, the amounts, and if payment has been made, and those kind of
What stages they're in, yes.
Yeah, so we'll need something more in depth for as we're going through the process.
So to that point, Christine has at least got us started on that. So let me share my screen on that.
Yeah, Christine and Rusty, while you're pulling that up, the Marion Country Club is under the business portion of this. I looked them up with the state, and they are a nonprofit. So we need to double check with them, but according to the state, they're nonprofit, so they should be moved down into the nonprofit category. I did look at the application, and he did circle for profit, but according to the state, they're nonprofit.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. So we'll adjust that here. So here's so this is, I mean, it's pretty simple so far, but at least we have track of what's come in at this point. And I would recommend that we not drill down yet, because that I think is a separate meeting. Because I can see all kinds of issues with this already, just to be honest with you. There are all kinds of issues on this sheet. So, but let's don't drill down yet. But imagine this sheet with all of those details that Tina had begun to list out, i.e., were they approved for a grant? If so, how much were they approved for? How much has been paid out to them? So this spreadsheet probably would have two tabs, one for businesses, one for nonprofits. And I will work together with Christine as we continue to develop the complexity of this sheet. Is that what, Janine, you and Tina meant when you were talking a few minutes ago?
Yes.
Yes.
And then also you might, if we're going to be looking at scoring, there are certain things that the committee had initially said that they wanted to
They could be
rate
listed
the
and checked.
applications on. So you will probably need to develop a scoring system, because it looks like we're going to have a lot of dollars requested, and you could put the categories of that and what the points assigned were, if you wanted to get that bar. I have a kind of a sample, like what we used for our CDBG, that I'll send to you, Rusty, and if you want to use any of that, you can.
So when what you just said, Tina, do you mean you have a sample of a scoring system?
I have a sample of, for our CDBG grant, we had, if we needed it, we had the ability to score it. We haven't needed to because we haven't had that many applications, but
I would love a starting point on that.
okay.
And so if you'd send that, Tina, that'd be great. And then Anthony, I don't know, could we maybe work together a little bit on that to think through that?
Yeah. When I got the spreadsheet, yeah, there's some big numbers there. I can tell you just from what I've heard, I had a conversation with Randy Collett. Some of these we're going to be whittling down quite a bit, because not all of what they've asked for is going to be probably eligible. And I can tell you from my perspective, I've had people call me asking, hey, can I turn in an application? I've told them yes in every scenario, because I don't know, so and I've told them, ask for exactly what you need, and then we'll be the ones that'll whittle it down. So that's what people have done. And there's several of these. There's 3 there on the business side that I've already made note of. I'll be contacting them to get them into the CDBG program. So those numbers could come down if they're approved. Then that leads me to a question with you, Tina. Some of these businesses that aren't in Hillsborough, but that aren't in Marion, can we get those businesses to submit a CDBG application with you guys?
That would be great, but it's our initial amount that the commissioners approved for that was $5,000. So yes, and we have quite a bit of money left that we really want to utilize. So yes.
Okay.
So even if they got 5,000 from us and got some through Spark,
right?
It's we want to use all that money.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I've got 3 of them here. I'm not going to be able to give any of them the full amount they've asked for, but I can give them quite a bit. Our cap is a lot higher than the county's cap, because we just don't know that we're going to be able to use the money. But I think that 3 of these here are going to qualify, and so we'll maybe be able to give them up to 10 or 15,000.
What does CDBG stand for?
Community Development Block Grant.
I just want to, that's just for my own knowledge when I hear it.
And so here in Marion County, Marion has a program, and they only have 17,000 left in their program. Hillsborough has a program. We have not officially awarded any, so we've got 122,000 there. Then the county has a program. I'm not sure. I don't remember how much money they have. And does the city of Peabody have a program too, Tina?
I don't believe they accepted it.
Okay.
Because we had already been working with City of Peabody businesses at the county level, and they didn't have, so I don't believe that they actually followed through on accepting those funds, but I'm not 100%.
Okay.
And-
I would think that we would know because they would have taken over the businesses that we awarded.
Okay.
So on this right here, like, somebody tell me if I'm wrong, but that's rejected out of hand.
Well, not necessarily, Rusty. I didn't talk to Center, but USD 410 called me and asked if they could also turn in an application. I told them go ahead, and then we'll look at it. I don't know
Okay.
that I don't know the scenario, and yeah, it's questionable. You know, my thinking is, yeah, we're probably not going to be giving the schools a lot more through this unless we have extra money.
Okay, gotcha.
And it appears like that's not going to be a problem. Like we're not
Yeah.
going to have extra money.
Okay.
So,
Fair enough. That helps me. I get what you're saying.
and the other thing too is, you know, and I don't want to pick on anyone in particular, but you know, if it's revenue replacement, they have to justify to us what the revenue was previously and what it is now. And you know, that's why like Hillsborough Kiwanis, I'm the president of Kiwanis, I turned in the application. There's a reason it's specific like that, because that is the loss of revenue that we had, $2,760.30. And with that, I took out any, you know, like we have arts and crafts. Well, it's canceled. So I added in the revenue loss from that, but obviously I took out any expenses, you know, that were related to that, because we have expenses related to that fundraiser that I would not expect Spark to cover, because we don't have those expenses this year. Looking at some of the applications, I don't know that that's been done on all of the other ones. In other words, I think they just took the revenue and they didn't take the expenses out. I could be wrong, but that's kind of what I felt like when I was looking at through those applications.
That makes sense.
Rusty, I want to bring up one point. I talked to a business yesterday, one that was shut down for 2 months, and reiterated that this was available. They were just talking, well, she was, well, I'm just going to tough it out. I said, this is what it's for. They've, you know, complete loss of revenue for, you know, 2 months. I'm just trying to think of other ways to get the word out that, yeah, if you took a hit, let's, you know, submit your application for this. I think we're covering it pretty good, but even there, that people are seeing, yeah, we know that it's available, but we're just going to, you know, rough it. I was surprised.
Thanks, Lloyd. I don't know how to respond to that, because what I think I heard you say is they're aware of the opportunity, but they're choosing not to step into it. And two things could drive that. I suppose philosophically they could be opposed.
Yes,
but
that's what it was. It's like, well, you know, that's my business. I'm like, it was through no fault of their own that they're shut down.
Right.
Yeah.
So that could drive it. But the other thing that could drive it, and I think Anthony's done a great job of mitigating this other factor in my mind, is the complexity of application. And we really didn't, you know, design a very complicated application process. That could be intimidating to people, is what I'm trying to say.
That's true. I guess my point would be is if you know, anybody in your different loops out there that you've been contacting or discussing with, and you don't see some ones that just seem obvious to you that haven't made application, and you put another bug in their ear to, you know, be part of this. I think we're doing a good job of getting the word out and doing that already, but I just was a little surprised that we'll forego it. So
yeah, I'm surprised too. I will tell you that by about Thursday or Friday of next week, that list of applications is going to grow by a large amount.
Yep.
Because I know, I'll just take our organization. It takes some time to, if you're going to be diligent with preparing, because we'd rather do the work on the front end of contemplating what is an eligible expense and what is not. And so I know our CFO and his staff, our controller, they're going through things very carefully, because what they want is a very tight application so that there isn't a bunch of work that has to be done by somebody to decide whether it works or not, you know.
Yeah. And
I'm guessing quite a few organizations will look at it that way.
that may be it too. I mean, this is a lot to do in a short period of time. They're still massaging and preparing. So, okay.
But if somebody is aware of a way to get the word out that we have missed, yeah, I think put that on the table because we still have time to do more to get the word out if we need to.
Okay. Just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Rusty?
Yeah.
Yes,
I-
Aaron.
I think it's going to be, I think the work we've done up to now is going to be considered fairly easy. Because when we start looking at these and trying to figure out how or what our protocol will be for whittling those down, that, to me, that's going to be very difficult. I just wanted to throw out there, I did see there was a county out there. I was reading in the paper one day that their spark money for their businesses and stuff like that was a set number. You know, and I don't know if they took whoever applied and divided that money out and that's how much they got. But then, you know, when I first read that, I was like, huh, that didn't make sense. Well, now after being on this committee, I'm like, well, at least they didn't have to sit there and figure out what, you know, what they could cut out and what they were not. I think it was Ellis County, if I remember right. But
So yeah, I've talked to a few people across the state in that same regard, Aaron. First, I totally agree with you. The hard work's coming. I think I've been thinking that for a while. Some are doing a equal sort of approach like you talked about there, and then some are doing a scoring system. What I've envisioned is our scoring system would, once we see the applications that we deem eligible, and I think we'll end up saying some aren't, but that we deem eligible, that our scoring system will create a ratio and then an amount of money will be in keeping with the score that a particular entity gets. Now, that may end up scoring out relatively equal distributions, or it may not. It may favor some organizations over others. But even then, if we take that scoring system approach and we look at it and say, this doesn't feel right to us, there's nothing that locks us into that at this point. But that I will allow to be a transition to wrapping the meeting up. And that is, it seems to me that our next meeting needs to begin to contemplate these grants. And while we had October 2 or something like that, somebody help me, what was our next meeting date that was originally scheduled? Does somebody have that?
I think it was second.
Okay. I would propose that we better not wait until then, that we better meet next week again. And even though the deadline for submission of the grants hasn't hit yet, we can begin to look at in detail what we're dealing with and probably make some assignments of work that needs to be done before then our October 2 meeting. Do you all agree with that, or would you rather wait till October 2 to begin to deal with these grant applications?
I think we need to probably jump on it.
Okay. Other thoughts? Do we have agreement on that we should schedule a 10 o'clock meeting next Friday?
I think that'll work. I think I'll be on the road, but hopefully I'll have good cell reception. At least I can listen in.
Okay. Christine, I think what will make some sense here is for us to take the spreadsheet that you've started listing out the grant applications, and let's create a Google Sheet out of it so that it can be shared and people can just click on it and look at it throughout the rest of the week anytime they want to get their minds around things and maybe already to begin to ask questions of each other. I see, Christine, you're going to weigh in, so hold your thought. Tina, I'll ask you a quick question. If we create a Google shared sheet and we begin to have a communication thread around it, are we violating an Open Meetings Act, or are we going to have to save all of that for an actual meeting? You're muted.
I know, because I wasn't really ready to answer.
Oh, gotcha.
Let me, gosh, let me just check with our art counselor about that, because the problem is, I mean, yes, I understand the need for everybody to be able to see that information, but you get into trouble with serial communications under the Open Meetings Act if you're having people commenting back and forth and taking care of the business outside of the meetings. And so just having the sheet is probably not, it just depends on exactly how it's used. If you're, I think it's fine to have people be able to put comments in and to be able to, as long as it's not interactive conversation. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's what I feared. So I think there's still value in creating that shared sheet so that Christine doesn't have to send it every 2.5 hours during the day as she updates it. As she updates it, and people are wanting to take a look at what they're going to be having to deal with in the next meeting, they can just click on it and look at it. It does limit our ability to be efficient, what you just said, but I understand, and that's why I brought it up.
I think you can even enter comments, you know, and that's probably fine if you're entering it into a document, but we need to avoid like everybody commenting back and forth on the email streams, right, and any kind of decisive things.
So if I were to, let's just say hypothetically next Wednesday, look at that Google Sheet, let's just say I did this, and I noted 5 things that I thought were going to be critical for us to contemplate in our next meeting, and I wanted people to be thinking about these things. I'm not inviting discussion, but I could just send an email out and say, hey, please put some thought into this. Would that be okay?
Yes.
Okay. Christine, what were you going to say?
Really nothing. I agreed with that Google Sheet aspect, but then Open Meetings Act came into play and I was questioning that too. So no, I'm good with that. I will do whatever we need to get this ball rolling more.
Okay, great. I think what I'll commit to you all is I'll take today's meeting, and insofar as it created expectations for things to be done in the coming days, I'll recap it in a bit of an email, because I think that we want to make sure that we're all on the same page with a few of those things. Our next meeting date, I'll put a Google invite on everybody's calendars for next Friday, and we'll have in these next days, at some point, we'll have a Google shared sheet that begins to allow us to look in some amount of detail at our grant applications that are coming in. I will also make sure that these spreadsheets, Anthony and Aaron particularly, that I've created for your groups to use, get forwarded to you with some amount of explanation of what we've been saying here, and that way you can communicate with the school districts and with the cities accordingly. Is there anything else before we wrap up? It's an ongoing pleasure to work with all of you. And let me know if I can help you with anything. I'll do my best. Otherwise, I'll see you all next Friday. Blessings, everybody.